I'm Ibrahim Mahama, an artist from Tamale in Ghana. I was invited by Bonaventure and Adam Shimshik for Documenta 14. And originally I brought a proposal about working on these specific structures and buildings in Athens. But also one of the earlier proposals was to travel to Athens and to live here. And through the research process, I found out that there were these group of buildings that were built in the 1930s for Greek refugees that were coming from Minor Asia. It's called Prosphylika. So the idea was to go and live there because I wanted it to be part of my research and also to really quite understand because my work deals a lot with this idea of occupation and all that. So I decided that I would just go and live there and then just do research and see what comes of it. And once I came to Athens and I started living there and working there, it changed my perspective in terms of how to approach the work. So in the end, I decided I was going to present a physical work that is making a physical intervention that people would see after the opening of the exhibition, but rather focus much more on the process in Athens. So the work involved just working with members of the community in everyday to-day things, like things that has to do with infrastructure or things that have to do with just the general conditions of life itself. And also, I was also very much interested in parallel structures, that is factories and other spaces around Athens. So I did a series of trips to other spaces, which are these old factories in the Port of Prayers, old marble sites that were abandoned during the crisis. And yeah, I did a series of documentations, videos, and other things, which would later be used in Castle for the exhibition. Yeah, yeah. So with exhibitions like Documenta in Venice and other exhibitions, you get an invitation, and then you respond whether you want to participate in it or not. And if you want to participate in it, you, based on the framework of the exhibition, you submit either a project or a series of proposals of things that you might want to do. But that requires some kind of research in terms of where the exhibition is, the political nature of the exhibition, or whether it's not political at all. And then once you've come to a certain conclusion, you send the proposal and then you make site visits, and then you make site visits again. But in the case of Documenta 14, you have to make several site visits because the work is taking the different forms. It's happening in both Athens and in Kassel. So you have to go to Germany, go to Greece, and then go back to Germany, go to Greece. So sometimes maybe some artists might be producing works that are similar in terms of the forms that it takes in both cities. Some artists also produce completely different works, and some artists also produce works that are quite affected by like both cities, like in terms of the form. One city inspires the other. So you really have to quite understand what you really want to make and the form that you want it to take. And once that is done and you start producing the work, no, it was very good, the dialogue with the curators. But I worked with closely with Adam and Bonaventure very closely. So mostly it was just having conversations with them in particular about the form of the work, which they were very supportive of, very, very supportive of, because I had a lot of freedom also to decide what form I wanted my work to take in. and particularly in Athens. I was much more particular about the work in Athens because the previous projects I had done before, I had worked a lot with various spaces. I had done this project at the Exchanger in Ghana, where I had worked with these communities, but I never really had the chance to live within these spaces and to be able to contribute to these spaces as some kind of a political gesture. So I thought Athens was quite an important place to be able to start that from. And it was very welcome, this idea. So I was actually very happy and very grateful that at least I was able to participate within this conversation. During Venice, I had a gallery, but it was a conscious decision for me to be able to find the money myself to be able to make the work for the exhibition. It was very important, particularly because I had spent a long time doing these independent projects, and I was raising money from works that I had sold in order to fund these independent projects I was doing. So I wanted to go into Venice with that spirit. It was really important for me. So it wasn't as if I didn't have any help at all from anywhere. I could have, but I chose not to because I wanted to make a specific point about it, particularly at that point where I was invited. I was just graduating from art school. So it was very important for me to be able to have control in terms of how the work was going to be made and the process and all that. And Documenta is totally different because the exhibition pays for everything. So there is also a lot more freedom in terms of thinking through the work. You don't have to stress so much. But of course, at some point when support is needed, there are ways of negotiating it. But I think practically this exhibition, it gives you a lot more freedom in terms of what to do and how to approach it. Back home, I have a studio assistant that I work with, but I also have other collaborators and other people that I work with within the city and other spaces. So depending on the project that we're doing, it takes quite a while. Sometimes it might take up to 2 years or more in order to realize a project. Even a lot of the projects never get realized because at some point, because I'm negotiating a lot with bureaucrats and also city authorities, owners of spaces, and sometimes there's a change in ownership or a shift in government or something, and it affects everything because you have to start all over again once there are new people involved. So it takes quite some time. We spend a long time negotiating these things. But once it gets to a point where it's matured enough, we make a move. It always doesn't work out, but at least through documentations and other things, sometimes you can present some of those things as part of the work itself. So I try as much as possible to distribute the responsibilities among the different collaborators, and we manage to get things done. No, with White Cube, I had been in conversation with them for over 2 to 3 years, and there was an exhibition that was proposed originally before Venice, and I needed some time to think about the exhibition and what kind of work I wanted to present, because aside the occupation series I was doing with the jute sacks, I was also working on other projects in the studio, which is the series of works that is currently in the show in White Cube called Fragments. So I just needed time to be able to make sense of all of it. So it took me quite a while to actually think through it and to be sure how the format I wanted the work to take, because I also have a very long history in like art school, like studying painting from my undergrad to my PhD. So I also wanted to approach the work, since it was going into the White Cube, I wanted to approach some of the works in a very painterly manner. So I needed more time to work on the aesthetics and also the subtleties of the objects that I wanted to present. And for me, working with them, It's very it's quite interesting because it gives you another mode of presentation. Though I'm still very much independent in terms of my practice, I still very much have control over the projects that I do and the forms that my work take. I don't think it's a question of how they will manage my career. I think it's a matter of what I want to do with my practice or with my practice. And I think that I still want to stick to the mode in which I've been working for the last 3-4 years. There are a lot of nuances to my practice in terms of interest and then objects that I'm interested in that are even a lot more subtle than most of the objects or projects that I'm working on now. So probably in the next few years, the work will get a lot more subtle than it is. But for me, it was just an important point to be able to start the way I started, because it was also very important to be able to make clearly or visible the work through the different spaces that I worked in. Because studying in art school, there was this tendency to believe that it wasn't possible to be able to produce work or to be able to exhibit work on a certain scale or nature or working within certain spaces. So first of all, it was very important to demystify all those things before going back to maybe a certain base again to start all over again. So for me, the idea of ground zero or starting all over again has always been very important to me. So I think that I'm committed to working on projects and then stopping at a point and then starting all over again when I think it's necessary. Yeah, by independence, I mean just having a lot of control over what you do. Subject matter, space, ideas, the ideology surrounding the works that you produce and the praxis, the motivations behind it and all that. All those things are quite important, especially when you're making art at a very sophisticated level. I think that it's very important to be able to maintain control over most of these things, which I tend to think that a lot of artists do have that control. But for me, it's very important to be able to stress upon it, because within this current generation of young artists, and also we are living in a very a time like a time of deep crisis. So it's very, very easy to be swayed away in terms of working with systems or institutions that want to determine the forms that your work take. And I think it's very important to keep in mind the very basis or foundations of art practice, artistic practice itself, and what it means to be an artist, and the freedoms and liberties that it promises that we uphold. So it's quite important to be able to at least still adhere to it and see if we can propose alternatives in terms of different experiences, different aesthetics, different modes of presentation, and also work in such a way that would open up the dialogue, or also spaces that would be more inclusive than it has been before through like museums and other institutions. I mostly don't like to talk about that one because throughout the courts was process, I never issued a word about it because I didn't want to give out too much information concerning that, because there were so many misconceptions, and also there were people writing things they didn't quite understand. The case is resolved now in my favor, so I've just put it behind me. Yeah, he didn't have any case. Yeah, it was just he was just talking. So I've put it in the past behind me. Yeah, I've just decided to concentrate just on my practice, and just see what direction it goes in, because that was just a distraction. It's not something that I want to put energy in my life into. Yeah. I spent a lot of time working within that period. Yeah. And that's how I got here. So I like to just spend time working because sometimes there's so many things that come your way that are just huge distractions. And if you spend any time on it, it's just a waste. Yeah. It doesn't help you to grow. Yeah. No, I think that younger artists I think they should be very ambitious, but also at the same time, they should be very cautious. There are a lot of people in the art world that mean well, but there are also a lot of people in the art world that don't really care about anything. They're just doing everything for their own gain. So people have to, first of all, if you are very much independent or you believe in this idea of independent practice, I think there's a lot more promise or hope. Yeah, there are things that you can do. Yeah, you have to have a lot of control over what you do and what you produce. Once you do have that, I believe that there is a lot that you can, yeah, you, yeah, you can grow. Yeah, you'll never know. Contracts don't really do much. Contracts, I don't think contracts do much. You never know, yeah, when people turn against you. I think the only person that you have is yourself, yeah, and the work that you make. Yeah, you just have to make sure that the work has a lot of integrity, yeah, and you give everything that you have for the work. That's all you've got. I don't think that you don't really have people. You have yourself and you have the work and the art that you're making. Yeah, you have to put a lot of energy into that. Yeah. If that fails you, then that's when there's a problem. But I don't really think that when people fail you, it's much of a problem. You can always pick up from somewhere and then continue. A future generation, I think it was online, and I was nominated by someone, and I accepted the nomination, and I sent in an application. And when I was nominated for the prize, I had to. There was a work that I had been working on for a few years, non-orientable in cancer, which I was going to show at the White Cube in the exhibition Fragments. So I proposed showing a part of that work in the Future Generation Art Prize, which I did. And but the idea was to present it completely different. So whereas in the White Cube, the work came together to form a structure in its own right. In the Future Generation Art Prize, I built a shelf which was made out of these bent wooden compartments, and we placed the objects on them as if it was some kind of a shelf. So I had to travel to Kiev to install the work, and after Kiev, the work is going to move from there to Venice for the Biennale. So probably I might have to go there to install the work again in the Biennale. I don't apply for residencies or anything. I'm doing a residency in Berlin starting in May. It's a year residency. They're called the DAAD. It's a very important and prestigious arts residency, and it offers artists who are practicing already the opportunity and the chance to live in Germany for a year and to do research and to be able to maybe explore certain aspects of your practice. So all the residencies that I've done so far is all by invitation. I never applied for any of them. And the prizes also, I never just apply. If it comes through a nomination and I think that I want to apply, I will. If I don't think I want to, I don't. It's mostly also about the structure of the prize. Maybe you think about the timeline. Sometimes it's also about the timeline. You're thinking that because sometimes some of the prizes require that you present an entirely new work, and maybe you have a new work, but you're not really ready to show it, and you're not sure about the context, so maybe you might skip it. And also for me personally, I don't really believe so much in prizes and other things, so I rather like to spend more time in the studio just working and doing my independent projects. So the future generation was because I had been following it for quite some time, and also the artists that had won it before, artists that had participated in it before, where they had produced really, really interesting works. So I thought it would be interesting just to be able to establish that dialogue with the platform. Maybe I will retire. Maybe retirement is no, but to be more serious, I think it's a different time that we're living in. It's possible to be able to do these things and still go on to work because it's just a beginning. For me, it's just part of the whole process. And also, you're participating in these two exhibitions, All the World's Futures and Learning from Athens. I've been very politically motivated in terms of the structures of it. And I think that my practice has just been timely in terms of the ideas that I work with. So it's possible to participate in a lot of other exhibitions in the future. But for me, what is more important is about the form that my work takes in the future, and how I'm able to maintain control over it within the next few years. That is a lot more important to me. And also, it's not also just about showing in big exhibitions. It's also about going back to your base and then also concentrating on doing things that contributes to those spaces. So I think for me, my future is more or less going back to Ghana, settling there, finishing my studio, and contributing to the art scene there. Is eventually one of these things have to be become a priority. And for me, I think that's what I want to do most with my life in the next few years.